Hi, I'm Becky Meagher, and welcome to Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit. How do you deal with transition in your life? I like to use the metaphor of transition area in triathlons, which I do. First you swim, then you get in the transition area, then you bike, and then you change, and then you run. And life is one big transition area, isn't it? Well, we have two guests here today talking about some major transitions. And it's a particular subject that if anyone's a parent, an aunt, an uncle, you're concerned about your young people. You're concerned about what happens. What happens when they are out of the house? They graduate from high school, they go to college. Are they going to be okay? What is a parent's worst nightmare? Can it happen? We have two guests here who are going to talk about what has happened to them and how they deal with transition. And this really will be a two-part program. So stay tuned for part one, which this is, and part two. And today we have Chip Forrester and Jeff Carr. And we're going to start with the story that Mr. Forrester has about his son who went to college and perhaps went on a different path of drugs and alcohol. And we want to hear about Wilson Forrester and how Wilson's life has become a transition and he is no longer with us, and how as a dad do you deal with this. And your story is a painful one to hear, but if you can save one life to help any other child, man child, woman child, it would be wonderful. So can you please tell us Wilson's story and about that?
Glad to. Well, I first want to just thank you for inviting me to be on the show. This is not the most particularly wonderful topic for me to embrace, and but it's something that it's helpful to be able to tell the story for my healing, but also to reach other young men and women who may be in the struggle that my son was in. And it's also great to be with you, Jeff. Jeff Carr and I go back many, many years in progressive politics, changing the way our state and city has operated. And so it's wonderful to reconnect with you and honor and commend all the good work that you've done over the years. And it's great to be back, and we need to stay in touch. There's still more work to do. So it's good to be here. You know, in a nutshell, my son, like many young men and women who go off to college, enjoyed the freedoms and the opportunity to do things that maybe you don't get to do at home. And alcohol is unfortunately a part of campus life, and in particular a more integral part of fraternity and sorority life than perhaps us parents would like it to be. But really the new phenomenon in this world is this fraternity world, sorority world, has been the addition of drugs, of legal prescription drugs that these kids get on the street, but it's not the heroin or the illegal sort of street drugs. And the phenomenon is about sort of increasing the effectiveness or the efficacy of the alcohol. And the pills, the Xanax, the Oxycontin, oxycodone, basically make the alcohol just much more efficient in the task of getting these young men and women where they want to get. And Wilson, from all our analysis and the autopsy, this was not a suicide. The coroner ruled this an accidental death. the three drugs that he had in his body, the alcohol, the oxycodone, and the Xanax, none of those alone would have killed him, but it was the combination of those three that become lethal. And the worry and the reason I'm here and sort of speaking this truth is that these kids don't know what these pills are doing. And I talked to you earlier, on the campuses maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there were young men and women dying of alcohol overdose, more passing out and dying because of asphyxiation.
Because they would vomit and they'd be on their back and they couldn't breathe and
suffocate.
And suffocate.
And that happened over a period of a couple years, and the fraternity and the sorority system realized that they had a serious problem on their hands, and there was a lot of awareness brought into that community about the need to see a brother on his back, knowing that he had had too much to drink, or a sister on her back, turning them over, making sure that they don't pass out. Well, that awareness about the mixing of the drugs with the alcohol really hasn't taken place. And that's the crucial message that we need to get to these kids, that the alcohol and the drugs together is a lethal combination that can result in them dying.
And then if your very poignant story about you wanting to get off a plane and meet your son in Arizona, I believe, and he was 19? 19 years old. That is every parent's nightmare, to be ready to see their child during, could tell that story, father-son?
It was the father-son fraternity weekend at the fraternity. There was going to be a golf tournament, and all the dads were coming out to be with their sons. I was excited to come out to see Wilson. This was going to be a great weekend of father-son reunion for all of us. And I got off the airplane. Wilson and I had an agreement that when my plane touched down in Tucson, this is at the University of Arizona, I would text him, and voicemails, these kids don't use voicemail anymore, it's all texting. And by the time he got my text, he would get in his car and drive to the airport and pick me up. And I got off the plane and got my bag and was waiting for him, and realized, well, maybe he wasn't coming to get me. And as I turned around to go in to call a cab, I was met by a uniformed University of Arizona security officer who said, "Mr. Forrester, we'd like to talk with you." And all this goes through my mind as to what that could be. I was taken to a room. There was an Arizona Tucson police officer also there to assist this University of Arizona security person to deliver the news that my son had been discovered about 2 hours before that had died on the fraternity couch in his fraternity. The other tragedy with it is just, not only was, as a parent, did I and his mother and his brother and nieces and nephews go through this, but he was discovered on the fraternity couch in the morning by the fraternity president, and and a couple other young men who were coming down to go to breakfast. And so, this will be an experience, an indelible mark on their lives. And one of the things we talked about was after this happened, I made kind of an effort to try and understand what the boys, and they're young men, I guess boy is probably not the right term, but they clearly were uninitiated as men in our society, who just didn't know what to do. I asked them, this was your brother, someone who you spent so much time with, and they were
in the fraternity.
In the fraternity, there's 60 young men. 60
young men
in this fraternity, and living together, drinking together probably, but also playing sports. And they knew Wilson was in trouble. They knew he was in trouble, had been in trouble for months.
And how did they know he was in trouble? what happened?
Well, a couple things. One, there was a small subset. I'd say most of the fraternity drank. Maybe there was one teetotaler, but I'd say of the 60 boys, probably 57, 58 imbibed. But there was a small subset that were using the pills.
With the alcohol.
With the alcohol.
To combine it.
And these boys knew it. And they knew that this little subset of 8 to 10 boys were using the pills. And it concerned them. But they didn't know what to do. They didn't know that they should go to an adult because the fraternity system had not educated them in leadership roles to be able to carry it to an adult. Alice, his mother, and I have talked about, we're not certain where Wilson was on the continuum of drug addiction. The pathologist who performed the autopsy didn't really think he was addicted, but this whole continuum of it, it's always difficult to know. And we don't know whether, had we been informed, we could have saved him. But we were never given the chance. With just a little bit of knowledge, I would have been on an airplane, his mother would have been on an airplane, and taking him out of school, created an environment where his behavior would have been managed in some way. I don't know if he needed treatment, I don't know where he stood on this continuum, but we were never given that chance. In addition, he had been called up within the fraternity disciplinary council.
So because of this problem?
This problem.
Okay.
And the problem was more he would act out, get into fights. Kids, the fraternity boys would fight, and he handled himself inappropriately. The irony and the real tragedy is that he had been called up for a Tuesday hearing following the Saturday, April 2nd of 2011, that he died. He was already in trouble for activities that he had participated in, and the fraternity knew that, and there was going to be a hearing of these young boys passing judgment on this boy in trouble. And so there clearly is a problem within the system that these young men who are not fully initiated as adults in our society are making decisions that are life and death decisions. And Wilson was those decisions that were made in that fraternity resulted ultimately in Wilson's death, and never gave us a chance to sort of intervene and participate as parents.
Were you aware at all that he was going to have that Tuesday in front of the board of fraternities?
No.
Is that something that you normally the parents would not even be told about?
Right.
That's between us, just us boy men.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I think this is certainly Fiji, which is the fraternity that he was a member of, has certainly done a lot of introspection. We understand that there's been some change of policies and the beginnings of an effort to sort of deal with bringing it to the attention of an adult. And the university the University of Arizona is extremely concerned, and there have been some university policies that have changed. One of the beneficial outcomes of his death was the beginnings of a drug and alcohol awareness week on the campus.
They hadn't had before?
They had never had that before. And so they had a week of classes throughout the day, classes for the sorority and the fraternity brothers to talk about the drug and alcohol issues, particularly the drug component. And I was invited to make one of the more difficult speeches that I've ever had to make at the campus. That at the end of that week, they had a Candlelight Vigil in Wilson's honor, and there were about 500 students there that night. And I went to deliver this message. It was not a particularly pleasant message to deliver, but one where I had hoped that perhaps his life, the message of his death could serve as some kind of signal to someone out there. And I said in my remarks, and I shared this with you earlier, that I said, in this crowd, there's somebody who is struggling with the issue of alcohol and drugs, and I don't know who it is out there, but there's
You said that in your speech. Some of you may be struggling.
And you think like my 19-year-old son thinks, that you're invincible. Wilson was a strong man, a soccer player, vibrant, physically, he thought nothing would happen to him. But it could well happen to you because of this devil, of this combination of these. It's really a devil that's dancing out there, and you have a choice. And you know, do you want a parent standing in front of a crowd delivering the message of their son not being here? And so there's help, and there actually off to the side there were some counselors that had participated in this Drug and Alcohol Awareness Week, and I had the privilege of meeting them and indicated that there are people here, I'm here, and at the end of my remarks, a few minutes after the crowd, a number of people came up to hug me, and particularly the sorority sisters who knew Wilson, and you know, sort of cried with me in it. A young man came up and said, "I'm in trouble. I need help," and that was an opportunity for me to do something. And then there were two other people, one who had a roommate who was doing the drugs and the alcohol. So that night, and I don't know if there were others, but I know there were 3 occasions that night where standing in front of the crowd talking about the loss of my son had some impact that would have potentially saved some other young person's life.
Wow, and the fact that you gave of yourself such a painful speech that had to have been and put it out there, and they felt safe enough to come, hey, I'm in trouble, I'm having problems here. And didn't you say that you still talk to some of the fraternity brothers?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing for me was to try and understand, you know, these young people in college, they are our future. And they are, it's like Jeff when you were in college and when we met. I mean, this is our future, and we'll all be in rocking chairs at some point, and these young men and women will be leading us. And I see a lot of good in these I call them kids. And so I wanted to understand what they were thinking. And so I spent time in sort of not leveling recriminations, but more talking to them. And so of the 60 boys, probably 20 or 30 of them I had conversations with over the course of months after his death. And I told you I got the second anniversary. I was in China with my son, Evan.
Your other son.
My other son.
Of the 2.
And I got probably 100 text messages and emails from these young men and young women now who are a couple years older, just all, you know, just saying, we know this is a painful day for you, but we're here for you. I just want you to know we loved Wilson and we'll always remember him. But in talking to the boys and the young women, it was just clear that they just didn't know what to do. And that was the failure of adults in providing the mentorship and providing the leadership at the fraternity level, at the university level, and at my level to give them the understanding. And as you know, I've been a part of Circle of Men here in Nashville, a group that has been meeting for 20 years. And part of our mission is to be able to mentor younger men in ways that give them the tools to understand the complexities of our society. And you know, in the old days, the Indian tribe, we sat around a council circle and we had elders who had wisdom, and we had young warriors who were inexperienced, and those elders transferred that knowledge to those young warriors in that circle. And we don't have that anymore. And these young men at this fraternity were sort of self-initiating, not being given the guidance. And so I hope, and I pray that the fraternity system in the university will provide that adult leadership that we as now older adults having gone through this can provide, which obviously was not provided for Wilson. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It seems like it's kind of a rampant thing that there's not the support of adults in the fraternities. I guess the fraternities really don't want those adults telling them what to do or anything, and it just hasn't. It takes a tragedy to get somebody's attention to look at this. And of course, the other half of this 2-part program will be Jeff Carr, who will be talking about also young people, but in a different way of, how do you call it? What is the gauntlet that they have to go through in order to be initiated as he was saying?
Well, it's basically boils down to humans' need for rites of passage. In ancient African terms, they would say that's a rites of passage where the ethnic group, the tribe, the nation would take the young warriors out, as Chip so aptly described, and take them usually at the age of 12 or 13. There would be circles of women who would take the young ladies. There'd be circles of men who would take the young men, and they would put them through something. I don't care if this is in Nigeria, I don't care if it was in ancient Kemet or Egypt, I don't care if it was ancient Sparta. They would take you and you would learn the principles of manhood, then be put through a physical and emotional challenge. And after you survived that, you were welcomed as a man back into the circle. Particularly, that has been something that has lasted the test of time. And we found that if you rob people of the rite of passage, they will create it for themselves. Because there needs to be some feeling of transition and completion. Whether that's a fraternity, sorority, an educational system, a triathlon, there needs to be a phase where you feel you have made some kind of step toward the next level. And in the case of adulthood versus childhood, that bridge in the middle is a rites of passage. And it becomes tough because our system has kind of thrown people into now adulthood. You find it on your own. And a lot of times young people, we think that they want to be free. But as a father of 5, I've learned that, yeah, kids want their freedom just like I wanted my freedom. My father would always say, be a kid as long as you can, because when you're going to be grown, when you get to be grown, you can be grown the rest of your life. And I would say, yeah, right. But my daughter, who's 18 now and a freshman at Tennessee State, where I went to school, called me recently, and she was almost in tears. And I said, well, what's wrong? Is there something? She was like, I'm 18, I'm growing up, and I miss my childhood, and you used to tell me, and I said, yeah, I know, and we all go through it. But I think that with all of the freedom that young people want, they still want some form of discipline, and they need some form of discipline that gives them a sense of accomplishment. Once they feel a sense of accomplishment, they feel as if they've grown. And that unique space of rites of passage is important because, as Chip alluded to, if we don't provide that system for them, they create it themselves. And often they find themselves in a circle of people who might be weeks or months older than them, who really don't understand it themselves.
Right.
And that's where the danger comes in, because it's that sense of belonging that puts people in situations to do things they would normally not do. And Dr. Martin Luther King talked about the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. It starts as pranks. It starts as fun at parties. It starts as a shot here and a shot there, and somebody saying, well, hey, try this with that. And before long, you find yourself in some behavior that can be inadvertently self-destructive. And that's how it happens. And that's why we come to programs like this and we can have this conversation, because it is something real. And I say to everybody, it could very well happen to you, because it happens to people who were smarter and brighter than you were. And if there's still that system that creates a space where people want to belong, then devastating things can happen.
I think one of the interesting things for Wilson, particularly, we had the celebration of life, not something we wanted to call a funeral, at Hume Fogg, and where he's a graduate, and there was just a sort of a wonderful facility there. They've got a great sort of theater and that could be used. And I think so many of the kids who went to school with him came back for the celebration of life, and it was the thing that came out to me was like, Wilson? How could that happen to Wilson? I mean, I'm a dad, and so I'm probably bragging a little, but I mean, he was the star goalie of Hume Fogg's soccer team that went to state and came in second, which hadn't happened in 30 years at Hume Fogg, and Hume Fogg was extremely proud because it's a public school without a field, and we're kind of and so he was a soccer player and a goalie,
an
athlete, and he was an accomplished viola player. Was in the Blair Youth Symphony, had studied viola for since he was 6 years old, and was pretty good academically. Probably understudied a little, but graduated well. And so people were surprised that a guy like that, good-looking, healthy, that this could happen. And I think that's part of the message that I want to deliver, is it can happen to anybody, just a little bit. And I really like what you said, Jeff, this kind of incremental sort of development. It's like, we'll do a little bit here and we'll do a little bit there, and then all of a sudden, with the bad judgment around, because there's not that mentoring, that adult.
The elders, that's what we're really, they're lacking the support from the elders, and it's kids, young people trying to figure it out with no elders telling this is a path, this is a way to go, right?
Well, they saw, the boys saw that, there were a number of times throughout that year when he drank too much and obviously had taken a pill and was just, and...
Had he blacked out before?
Sort of. And they saw that, and particularly his roommates were really worried. And Wilson would just, like a day later, they'd sort of talk to him about it. Oh, you guys are just,
just kind of shrug it off. Yeah.
And where Wilson at that point needed someone to, grab him by the lapels and take him to the side. This is a problem, young man, and we're going to talk about why this is happening. Again, I don't know if we had been able to intervene where he was, but not having had the chance and wishing we had the chance that someone from the fraternity, a roommate or an adult, had picked up the phone and said, we think there's a problem here. And anybody who had said that, I would have known that there was a problem. Would have certainly taken action very, very quickly, and not given that chance because of that. The fact the kids didn't know what to do.
Well, it sounds like, in, of course, hindsight, that if somebody knows that a young person has a problem, it's okay to point it out.
Right.
It is okay. It's not like you're telling on them. It could save their lives.
Right. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And part 2 of this will be Jeff Carr explaining about hazing, which is part and part of the same kind of mindset. It can be disastrous also. And he has a film that is coming out that will be, we're going to talk about that in part 2. So thank you, Jeff, for being here. Stay tuned for part 2. Thank you so much, Chip, for being here and sharing your story.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.